So to close out October and Halloween season this year, I will try to make an argument for watching some older horror movies. There are certainly a lot of people who I think have an automatic aversion to older movies, given that they're very different, admittedly, in execution, style, acting style especially. I think that's the most notable thing. Music style, all sorts of ways, compared to modern movies we see like in theaters. So I'll just try to say my piece here to make a case for them. Part of this is going to depend on your expectations and your goals in watching movies. If your goal in watching a horror movie is just to try to find the scariest thing you can find still, realistically, you're probably not going to find that in an older movie. Like I said, it's just so different back then. We have more exposure to more intense things now. And I think it's just harder for some of those simpler things to work on a modern audience. So while you may not find older movies scary in the same way that modern movies are, there's always hope. You just never know what's going to scare you. It's always worth trying a lot of different things, if you're trying to find that. So there is some hope there. I have seen a couple of things in older movies that have gotten to me a little bit. But the second thing is that, I certainly want to make the argument that good horror is not contingent on being scary. Out and out scares are not the only thing that it can accomplish. Especially, there are plenty of horror movies that go for mood, that go for just a general tension, atmosphere type of thing. I think that is something that stays with older horror movies, that you can still see plenty of strong atmospheres and interesting aesthetics in older movies. And even in movies that aren't out and out horror in the same way that some modern horror movies are, there's still like gothic sorts of aesthetics and feelings and like a sort of cozy. I think a lot of people can identify like that old movie feel when they see it. And I think there's something comforting about that. So maybe look at these for comfort watches, maybe look at them for different sorts of atmosphere, maybe even just look at them for historical purposes if you're into film, because it's always good to get a full range of, the timeline of cinema, the different genres, and the different kinds of movies that have been made and can be made. If you haven't watched movies from before, probably like the 70s or so, then I think there will be a little bit of an adjustment required for some of these, especially the silent films. But personally, I think it's worth it. I think it's fun to try to find new and different types of movies. I think it's fun to try to meet the movie on its level, to try to find what is good about it, essentially. Maybe that's more active than some people would prefer to put into a movie, but personally, I enjoy that a lot, and I think it's a worthwhile exercise. Most of these are going to be silent films. We'll throw in a couple from subsequent decades, but let's just kick it off. The first one is going to be Andalusian Superstition from 1912. Segundo de Chaumont was an early innovator in film, making imaginative works kind of in the vein of Georges Méliès, closer to him than, like a D.W. Griffith or filmmakers who are making more real-life movies, more chase movies, things like that. This film is about the imagined revenge of a gypsy woman who is sent away. The main attraction of the film is just this wonderful main set piece, this prison type of location. It has great red, hellish accents in it, interesting decor, props. There are imaginative and bizarre monsters in a couple scenes. And also there's just like a really great little moment that almost looks like a dolly zoom, long before dolly zooms were really used for anything. To me, this is a great example of how you can adjust expectations to find something good in older movies. If you look at this and compare it to what is scary about modern movies, like, of course, it's going to be significantly different. It's not going to offer as much of a stimulus as newer films will. However, like I said, I think the craftsmanship is really admirable. The aesthetic of like the double exposure ghosts and bells and things like that, like it's obviously not frightening because we can see, the fact that it's an effect quite clearly. It's not shocking to us that you can show, supernatural things, quote unquote, on camera, but it puts together a nice, strong aesthetic. And I think that's the admirable thing to look for in a movie like this. Look for, what it is trying to do and what it is able to do, even if it is not the same thing we're used to. Next, I'll talk about Suspense from 1913. Bet you did not know they were making home invasion movies over 100 years ago. This is a now recognizable story. It is a menacing home invader, a family at home, a husband racing to reach his family before the invader does. This film was directed by Lois Weber, who was one of the first great female directors in cinema. It has a striking amount of style in it, especially for the era. And even some moments that feel, if a moment like that was in a modern movie, that would not be out of place stylistically. Just really nice shots, like a nice top-down one, very cinematic. This unique triangular split-screen editing, even a little carriage car chase type of deal. There's a lot packed into just 11 minutes, and some really great cinematic moments. And you could tell this film is ahead of its time, and it's really admirable. And it genuinely does have a nice amount of tension to it. Next, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Francis and his friend Alan visit the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, an exhibit where the mysterious doctor shows the somnambulist Cesar and awakens him for some moments from his death-like sleep. This is another film with strong atmosphere, maybe one of the strongest. And I have talked about this film on a couple of other videos, so I may be repeating myself here, but this is from German Expressionism era, which is characterized by, these clips I'm going to show right now, like the warped and, non-Euclidean backgrounds, the strange, irregular spaces that these lines create, all the deep shadows, the colors help a little bit to delineating day and night and locations. It's also got a compelling narrative. If you watch the movie, you will probably end up recognizing the type of story. Certainly unique for the time, really wonderful storytelling. Yeah, certainly one of my favorite aesthetics among silent films. You just don't get anything quite like this. Maybe my favorite recommendation among all these movies on the video. Next, I'll touch on The Phantom Carriage from 1921. This is made by Swedish master Victor Sjöström, and you could cover a lot of it by saying it's like a darker version of A Christmas Carol. Not the exact same, but you will see clear similarities there. More, I guess, for New Year's Eve than Christmas. An alcoholic, abusive ne'er-do-well is shown the error of his ways through a legend that dooms the last person to die on New Year's Eve before the clock strikes 12. It's similar to A Christmas Carol by being a moral tale, but it's like all of it is filtered through the lens of the spirit of Christmas future. Yeah, I'm not going to say a lot more about it because honestly, I think the comparison really speaks for a lot of the film, but it is very moody and dark, visually and metaphorically. Check it out to bring in the new year, inspire yourself to make some New Year's resolutions, I guess. Next, Haxan from 1922, also Swedish, actually. One of the more unique entries on this list as well, as a sort of documentary complete with dramatizations. The film uses a series of dramatic vignettes to explore the perception of and persecution surrounding witches. It covers quite a bit of territory, going from origin stories, witches poisoning, acts of deception, betrayal, temptation, baby sacrifice, all the classics. The devil himself shows up in a couple of scenes, which is fun. There are witches flying broomsticks even. There's really wonderful artwork, great environments. Again, of course, atmosphere, aided by like a really wonderful restoration that is visible at least on Criterion Channel. It all folds in nicely to this idea of witches in comparison to mental health that the film draws out. It makes more sense in context, but another use of theme storytelling in the use of in this film. And also, of course, given that it was banned in several countries when it came out, it must be good. Next, A Page of Madness from 1926. Probably the most unique experimental film in the video. Of course, again, we have more experimental films than this now. You can see, like, if you were to watch all of these films in series, you could see a clear difference between the style of A Page of Madness and the other ones that came before it. A man takes a job at an asylum with the hopes of freeing his imprisoned wife. Very shadowy movie, lots of darkness, a lot of bizarre character movement. There's uncanny and not quite right quality about the film, I think, that perhaps transcends the time period more than some of the other films I'll talk about. I think this one is more easily appreciable than, like, Dead of Night, for instance, which I'll get to later. But yeah, asylum freakouts, there's bizarre behavior, menacing crowds coming against our protagonist, all the good stuff, and some kind of abstract, some kind of symbolic visual work, some of the editing as well. Yeah, atmosphere visuals, like it's very memorable. It's worth a watch, not just to see what experimental cinema was like early on, but also to get a little bit of a glimpse at early Japanese cinema. Next, Vampyr, 1931. A student of the occult encounters supernatural haunts and local evildoers in a village outside Paris. So this was a movie that has a scene in it that genuinely did scare me when I watched it. It's just deeply unnerving. I won't say which one it is, but it's in there. Love that scene so much. This is another mood piece, thrives on the environment, the lighting, some camera stuff. It is kind of interesting to see how much more active the camera is able to be in this movie, for example, compared to some of the silent films just a few years earlier. Part of the environment feels, almost mystical, mysterious in this otherworldly way. It's something special, honestly. And there's just like this gothic ambiance to everything that's happening. It's slow. I think the slowness is kind of like a trance that the whole movie and the whole setting puts you under as you're watching it. There's a lot of vampire lore as well, of course. Who doesn't love vampires? And it's Carl Dreyer, who is one of the most famous directors of the time period, arguably one of the best to ever do it. So, if you're just looking for historical context, he's a great director to watch. Next, The Uninvited. We're going to jump to 1944 here. The Uninvited is maybe more gothic romance than straight up horror. Gothic romance is very much welcome to a brother and sister move into an old seaside house that has been abandoned for many years on the Cornwallian coast, only to discover that it is haunted by the ghost of the mother of their neighbor's granddaughter, with whom the brother has fallen in love. Lots of family members. Wonderful aesthetics, like I said, very gothic, ghost story feeling. The location is awesome. The sea is both romantic and, menacing and dark when it has the occasion to be. The night is captivating, shot really well. Costuming is nice. The main musical theme is great as well. To me, this is a very likable movie as well. The characters are fun to root for, and you want the best for them. Would recommend this one for something that I might expect to be more of a comfort watch. And then last, I will talk briefly about Dead of Night, which is a horror anthology grandfather, and not just horror anthology, but also spooky doll sort of ancestor. Architect Walter Craig, seeking the possibility of some work at a country farmhouse, soon finds himself once again stuck in his recurring nightmare. It's a collection of strange stories from, these people, these characters assembled in the farmhouse. It's an anthology, you know what to expect. Some of the, quality varies a little bit. I'm not a fan of the fourth segment, for example. There are interesting stories, like I mentioned the scary doll already. I love that short, very unnerving. It has some old-timey charm because, there's a more pronounced, I think, theatrical style to this movie. You certainly won't find it in modern film, for better or for worse. So I think this has a very distinct charm that is recognizable with older movies. So again, this one may be more suited for comfort watch than looking for something scary. But, give it a shot either way. I like it. It's a good time. So those are my picks for some older horror films going back to the mid-40s. There's some obvious ones I didn't bring up, like Universal Monster movies or Nosferatu or something, but doesn't mean I don't like them. Just means that these were the ones that stuck out to me that I do enjoy a lot. So if there are other personal favorites of yours you want to recommend, then leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.